here on stage with me, Marcos Corridon, Leanne Slattery, and Bob Zabzak, and myself, Mark Geis. So I guess what I want to start out doing is first just, we're going to self-introduce ourselves. So let's do that. So do you want to start, Marcos?
Hi, yeah, I'm Marcos Corridon. I work for US Steel, and you guessed right, we make steel. So,
And you're in the US.
and I'm director of marketing, and we work in the shows, and we also launch a new product, and do forecasting, new economic forecasting, all kinds of stuff like that.
I'm Leanne. Can you hear me? I'm Leanne Slattery. I'm the sales support manager at ATAS International. We are a small family-owned business. Third generation is involved in the management now, and we manufacture metal wall cladding and metal roofing and all types of components made out of metal for buildings.
I'm Bob Zabzak. I am the technical director for the MCA. I'm an independent consultant right now, filling this role, and but prior to that, I worked for the solar industry for a couple of years in the renewable energy VIP fee space, and then before that, I was about 30 plus or minus years in the industry. Started out as a consulting engineer, got my PE, and then into the metal building area where I started as a design engineer, actually quotation engineer, worked my way up, left major manufacturers research, director of research and development in 2018. Been blessed to have MCA as a client, and ever since everything's gone well.
Pretty cool. And I'm Mark Geis. I'm director of product management at S5. I'm with the Cowboys. I can't draw a crowd like Rob Haddock can, but. So I've been with S5 probably a little bit over 4 years. I've been in solar for close to 15 years, and I'm part of the solar side of the business for S5. So today the main focus of today is going to be on sustainability. But the bigger picture is what people are calling now ESG, which is environment, social, and guidance. So we're going to really focus, because of the crowd, because of where we are today, the show, a lot of it's going to be on the sustainability aspect of it, but we are going to dive into social and guidance as well. And first I want to have, actually, Leanne has a really good description of what ESG means. So,
Well, years ago, you heard about CSR or corporate social responsibility. This is kind of taking it further. With the CSR, a lot of that was, what is your company doing with philanthropy and donations and supporting your community and all of that. But now the ESG is more towards sustainability, along with diversity, equity, and inclusion. You've probably heard about that as well. But the most simplistic description that I heard recently is E is for environment, so what are you doing for the planet? S is social, so what are you doing for the people, whether it's your employees, your customers, or society in general. And then G is for governance. So how are you being held accountable for your actions and actually tracking and tracing whether it's your emissions or anything like that, really trying to doing good as a whole.
great, thanks. So I'm going to start with Marcos. US Steel is the big boy in the industry. So what does your company do for sustainability? What is it has been doing?
Yeah.
What's the path ahead? And then we can talk a little bit about the industry as well.
Sure.
I have slides. Just tell me what slides to go to.
Yeah, and US Steel, we started this journey. We've been always working about the environment, and there's a lot of rules out there. We need to have our air quality and water usage, everything is controlled, and we need to do it. Now it's a different level, right? We're taking environmental responsibility to a different level. We really believe that our new strategy is the best for all. We believe we meant it. We need to be the best for everybody, for the people that work in there, the people that buy our stock, the people that buy our materials, and for the planet Earth. Right? If you believe or not in global warming, you may not believe it, but I will tell that economy believes in that. If you go try to get a loan for a big company like us, for us to get a loan now, we need to have environmental numbers to present and to be approved for that loan. And it gets a lot more expensive if you're doing a project that will generate more CO2 than you could. So it's becoming a mandatory thing, and we do believe in do the right thing for the environment. So we have two commitments that we did lately. We're going to be, by 2030, we're going to reduce 20% of our intensity, the CO2 intensity, and we're going to be neutral in 2050. So we are working towards that, and I can talk a little bit about what the industry is doing to get to that. There's several different things. Some technologies are already working, and we know they're going to work. Some other technologies, they're being tested. But we are like looking at everything to meet that goal of 2050 to be completely carbon neutral. And today we do work in greenhouse gas. We work with our water. We make sure that we're using less water. And a lot of times the water we send back to the lakes are cleaner than when we get it. And we have also reducing other kinds of not only CO2, but all the other gases in our plant. We try to control it and really capture and make a difference. Really keep it as much as we can internally and not sending this out to the environment.
Cool.
And as a global thing, like 7% of the total greenhouse gas emissions come from steel. Steel is a very, very big industry, and I think you can tell that it's like 10 times larger than aluminum, 7 times larger than concrete. So it's one of the biggest, and it's everywhere, right? You can look around, it's everywhere, right? And once you put that in there, it's gonna be there for 50 to 100 years, right? And but we are working a lot of recycling and having new facilities that can do more recycle and continue going steel.
Hey, Marcos, can you talk about the difference between operational carbon and embodied carbon? It might be a good time.
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's this differentiation, right? Differentiation that we have between those two. I would say operational is after, right? So if you you construct a building, there's materials that you're going to put in that building. It does have the embodied carbon of those materials, which is our part. That's what we are working on, to reduce that carbon footprint in our materials. So when you put in the building, you'd have less of that CO2 intensity. Now, you can make a building that has better insulation, and it will use less electricity to keep it cool, to keep it hot, inside will lose less gas. So that life of the building, how things are working, that's the operational carbon footprint that you would have. So designing the correct way for the building, use less electricity or less energy, that's the way you would reduce your operational carbon intensity.
And then, so what's embodied carbon?
So the embodied carbon is what comes in the materials, right? Like the steel, the concrete, those are, and that's where we are working on. Like companies like us, we're working to reduce that. So when customers buy from it to make a building or anything like that, they will have the lower as possible embodied carbon. But that is something that is kind of out of your control if you're building. You can choose better materials, so you have lower carbon footprint, but really what is in that material is embodied in that material, is part of the material.
What do you think is harder generally, to reduce operational carbon or embodied carbon? What's a bigger challenge for the industry?
I think they're both challenging to do it. I think the material right now, there is a lot of challenges to get in there, and you can see in the industry, you can talk about two different types of steel making. There is electric arc furnaces that use a lot more recycled material, and there's the regular integrated that use a little less and use a lot more, it generates more carbon because it has coal to make it. So those two types, it's out there. The more recycle you have, the less CO2 intensity you're going to do. And there's things that we're doing for both of them to try to do things like using biomass, which is pretty much instead of burning coal, you're going to burn residuals of other processes that would be going to a landfill or something like that. We're going to use that to generate energy for our processes. Or you can do a carbon capture, which is a quite fascinating technology that is out there, that you really grab all the carbon that you throw into the nature and you're going to do something with it, another product or even bury under the ground. And there's electricity for the other type of steel, the EAF. You need that electricity because it becomes this electric arc furnace. You're melting scrap pretty much, and you need a lot of electricity to do that. So having a renewable electricity, it will really help you to reduce the CO2 intensity. And we are building electric solar fields right now beside our plants to try to have a better footprint for us, but that is all that work that we need to do to reduce that. So there's a lot going on in the industry to reduce the embodied carbon situation.
So you have one other slide that I really liked, this one. So can you talk to this slide about the intensity and the differences between
Yeah, so it's kind of an eyesore in there, but we pretty much, the two major ways that I mentioned, the integrated way of making steel, you're going to reduce iron ore with coal, and when you do that, you generate a lot of CO2 in the environment. And it has, in an average, about close to 2 tons of CO2, scope 1 and 2, to 1 ton of steel that is produced. In the electric arc furnace way, it's about 0.4 tons of CO2 per ton of steel produced. And in the US, actually, we have about 70% of all the steel made here is electric arc furnace. So the US is definitely the cleanest steel industry in the world, and it's getting cleaner. For example, US Steel, we did shut down a blast furnace last year. We're bringing a new EAF right now, so that switch itself reduced a lot of our carbon intensity, and having that in the industry really helps. So every time you get imported steel here, you're getting 2.5 CO2 per ton of steel produced. So you're bringing a lot of that to or embodied in that material, and it's going to be in your building, in your product. So really working on that reduction, that this industry in the US is ahead of the rest of the world for sure.
All right, so let's, Bob, so you work on behalf of the industry itself.
Right.
What do you see going on? And I know you have a slide similar to this. So
Right.
what do you see going on?
Well, first thing I'll say is that if you've ever heard the saying, you can't manage what you can't measure, that's really a critical component in business, right? You obviously, if I were accountant, the accountants, they'd be nodding their head, right? You keep balance sheets, you keep cash transaction records, you have a general ledger, you know when cash goes from one account to the next. That stuff's basic, right? Well, the same is true with environmental impacts, including carbon. There are ways to keep track of it and keep accounting of it. So what this all boils down to is data, collection of data. Marcos did a great job of kind of talking about what they're doing at US Steel, and US Steel works through other associations to have their data submitted as part of industry average data. And we work with our consultants, our LCA consultants, and they use that data, and then they look at our plants and do a data collection system with our plants, and we have a task group of members that come and they sit and they contribute this and they model this in an LCA tool, and they determine what these impacts are. And so it's a very scientific data collection, data-oriented processing and modeling function, much like you'd see with any other kind of accounting system. You're just accounting for carbon. So these are the 3 things that come out of that for MCA. We have roll form cladding, so that's exactly what it sounds like, and that's metal, that's steel and aluminum. We've done data collection on both sides of both industries. We have one for insulated metal panels, as you know, or maybe you don't know. An insulated metal panel is 2 roll form skins with polyisocyanurate or polyurethane foam insulation between them. So they actually borrowed some of the data from the roll form cladding, but then they supplied some other stuff. Metal composite materials, very similar. That they could be aluminum, they can be steel, they can be other types of metals. And then they have, generally speaking, some type of plastic resonance support. There could be structural support behind. It makes those panels flat. So they're bringing that into the equation. So they collect this data and they go through a modeling process using another type of document called a PCR, or a product category rule. So product category rule for each one of those three things, which tell you, what the life cycle of that product is, how they're made, and then consequently shows you the bottom line accounting for each one of those things. So we know from looking at our data, and this is that those things are available free on the MCA website. So we know by looking at our data that almost all of our carbon impacts are experienced by the time we receive a coil of steel or aluminum or whatever material we're fabricating on. The embodied carbon of those, we're adding very little to the embodied carbon as a manufacturer. We roll form them, we package them, we ship them, we do all that good stuff, and we're an important part of the process because we're the ones that's actually putting it in the hands of the consumer, but an overall small contributor. So what you really, to those impacts, so what you really want to start asking yourself is, okay, I've done my data collection, I've known my management, I've averaged it with my peers, now then, how can I do better, right? And if you've got the data, then you can make those decisions. And so AISI did a really good job of putting this graphic together. So they talked about imported carbon. So this is both a embodied carbon plant-specific issue, but also a foreign issue. So here's basics. We produce a certain amount of steel here in the U.S. There are imports as well. Okay, we have embodied carbon outputs from the U.S. There are embodied carbon outputs from foreign steel. But if we really want to compare those things, we need to think about this in terms of those two numbers multiplied together. Okay, I can bring in a ton of carbon-intensive steel. I can bring in a ton of less carbon-intensive steel, but it also matters how much of that I bring in. So this is a bar chart. This kind of just shows you, and I think the line chart, I don't know if we had the line graph. Yeah, there you go. So Brazil is not the most carbon-producing steel-making country, nor are they the greatest importer of foreign steel. But if I take those two numbers and multiply them together, look where they are in the chart, and that's what matters. We're actually importing carbon into this country when we choose to use foreign steel. You can say, well, that's good or bad. I don't know. That's another discussion we can have. But the fact of the matter is, the U.S., to Marcus's point, somewhere way down at the end.
It's probably just imports.
Oh yeah, this is just imports. I'm sorry.
So where would the U.S. stand then?
The U.S. is right in this area, right in here,
Okay.
right before you hit Australia. Sorry, I can't reach quite that far. And so those are the things you have to think about. And what we're trying to do is we'll get to that point. I'm going to use this word later when we move on to other parts of the ESG discussion. We need transparency. In order to make those decisions, we have to have the data. In order to have the data, companies and contributors have to be willing to be transparent with their processes and their manufacturing capabilities and what they do. Less so about the capabilities, sorry, but what they're doing with those materials and what those carbon impacts and other impacts are. This is the same true for eutrophication, resource use and antibiotic depletion and other metrics you track with LCA as well. We're focused on carbon today, but it all is a basic accounting system that works in the same way.
So does that data impact supply chain decisions? Is that what it's meant to do? What do I buy?
It is exactly meant to do that. So what we're seeing is the buy clean. Oh yeah, perfect timing. So this is a list of different states considering or implementing a process of considering, legislating, or implementing buy clean acts. And they're all based essentially on EPDs, those documents I showed you earlier. Now, we have an industry average EPD. This is what's called a product-specific EPD in most of the states. But the question, of course, is, all right, I know what my carbon output is. What do I compare against? So what we're seeing happening in the legislative level, and this has already shown itself in California and some of these other programs, that the industry average number is going to be the baseline, the hurdle, if you will. And now we're going to be asking in these product-specific applications for you to go clear that hurdle. Excuse me. As I mentioned, this has been happening mostly at the state level, so it's publicly funded construction at those states. But we know what's going to happen. We know this is going to grow into the private sector and continue to work its way across. And the reason why is this slide. You're really good at this.
I can read your mind.
You can see right here, these are the groups. These are our influencers, right? Do they buy a lot of steel? Hardly any. But what do? Well, they tell us what to make. right? These are design professionals, the Structural Engineering Institute. They are committed to net zero, neutral, carbon neutral structure design by 2050. The MEP, they're the ones that make the mechanical, electrical, plumbing equipment. They've got committing to zero carbon or net zero carbon 2040. I think you might be familiar already at American Institute of Architects. They have one, and Architecture 2030 Challenge is actually kind of a hybrid effort between those, but it's being led by AIA. So we know that this is coming in the private sector. We're going to use what we're learning by implementing watching the rules being implemented at the state level to teach us how to go about, because we know it's coming in the private sector.
And if I might add on to that point of the imported carbon that you're talking about, in Europe, they already created a new law. They are being voted right now, so it's not implemented yet, but they will be charging for any imported steel coming into Europe. If it is a higher carbon footprint than the carbon footprint of the European steel, you're gonna need to pay an extra for each ton of CO2 that you bring into the country. So they're gonna start, there's a lot of talk in Washington to copy that idea. It's not implemented in Europe yet, but you can see it coming.
I doubt very seriously if it won't happen. To be honest with you, I think carbon tariffs are going to be a real thing in the United States probably within the next 5 years.
Cool. Great. So we've heard from a big company that's leading the way, the industry stuff. So let's talk to Leanne about a smaller company. What efforts are happening? And I know you can imagine the difference between a big corporation with a team of people that work on this, and now a small company may have one person in the company working on this. So what's the distinction? What do you see happening?
Well, with the small companies, I think everybody is aware of the sustainability efforts have to be stepped up, whether you're a 10-person company or a company the size of U.S. Steel. We work a lot with architects, so we're aware of these types of things that they're looking for. With ATAS, our sustainability message right now is broken down on our website into two different categories. One is how we are a sustainable company, the efforts we're doing internally to make our operations more sustainable and more environmentally friendly, but then also the sustainable products that we produce that can benefit, and that's where these guys here are looking. They definitely want to do business with a manufacturer that is operating sustainably and is doing the right thing, but they also are really interested in the sustainable products and how those products can help in the overall effort to make a building more energy efficient, which is going to result in less carbon. And that's kind of where we have focused in the past, is how our products can help in that regard. So we have several different products, whether it's insulated metal panels for either the roof or the wall, cool metal roofing that has the cool pigments in the paint that reflect the sun's rays so you don't bring that heat into your building. That's a way that's going to help in this effort. There's a solar air heating metal panel out there that helps preheat fresh air before it's brought into the building. So all these different efforts we really promote that aspect of the products that we make, and not to mention all of the metal products having recycled content or are 100% recyclable after their life, and they're going to have a long life compared to other materials out there. So that's one message. But what we need to do a better job internally is we've done the LED lighting and the motion detectors. We do have solar arrays on 3 of our facilities. We'll have a 4th one by next year. So we're generating power on the rooftop of our facilities. We also have the solar air heating panels on 2 of our facilities right now, which is really helping us save, it's saving the company money on our winter heating costs, but it's also, producing less carbon, the operational carbon, which is going to help, the people like the architects look at us and say, oh, what are you doing internally to help reduce your costs? So our challenge is going to be with EPDs. Right now we participate in the Metal Construction Association's industry-wide EPD, which is great. I think eventually we are going to have to go to our own EPDs, product specific, and that might be mandated down the road too, that the industry-wide might go away. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but
Used as the bar, right? So it'll be used as the baseline's a better word to put it. A better way to put it. It'll be used as a baseline upon which the product-specific EPDs will be compared. And we're already seeing that. So, like for instance, by California, I think it was 175. You had to show that you were no greater than 175% of the industry average. Okay, that's not a very high bar. Or actually, we're trying to get under, so it's not. But the idea, of course, is they're going to drop that. And so, if you think about what does that mean, well, ultimately, are you if you're exactly the industry, if your product specific is exactly industry average, then you're the median case, right? So, and that's where they want to go. They're going to continue to lower that. So they have to be able to compare it versus the baseline. And so I'm pretty confident that will continue to be there, but you're going to be asked to do your own efforts in that, from that perspective in order to know where on that scale you're at.
And I think you brought a very good point when you mentioned that architects look at you and see that you are reducing your operational carbon footprint, right? You have, because they will want to do business with who think alike, right? They're thinking of making the planet better and reducing the CO2 intensity. So people will want to do business with that. So it's the right business decision to do.
So it's really like dual strategies. One strategy is to help the world, and the other one is to market those products so that you eventually sell more, because you determine that you guys have cleaner steel, cleaner products. So one area, and this is sort of my part in this, I guess, is talking about on the energy side. So the more renewable energy you use to make products, it reduces that embodied carbon, right? We've talked about that. So I just want to show this. So the solar industry itself, with new incentives that have come out as part of that Inflation Reduction Act, the new forecast for the amount of solar being installed in the U.S. is going to triple in the next 5 years. So right now there's 142 gigawatts on the ground that have ever been installed. So in 5 years, that's going to be tripled, just due to more demand, the incentives making things just economically good to put solar up. So that's I look at those numbers that this is SEIA, the organization for solar, puts these numbers out, and it's to me it's pretty exciting to look forward. And a lot of this energy will be used to power manufacturing. So
Absolutely.
So when we drink our own Kool-Aid, so this is our manufacturing plant in Texas. We have probably 260 kilowatts of solar on it. Some of it is new. The stuff in the back is pretty new, because we expanded our facility a few years ago. This is our new headquarters, which just a month ago, 2 months ago, we put 50 kilowatts on that place. You can see Pikes Peak in the background. It's pretty cool. It's in Colorado Springs. And then, I guess, what I think the steel industry helps the sustainability on the energy side, as well as that a metal roof is, the better place to put solar. If you put solar on an asphalt roof or single ply membrane, there's a good chance that that the solar system will outlast that, and you're going to have to rip it up and throw it away, and go again. Whereas putting a metal roof, which is 60 to 70 year asset, is really, you can look at that as sustainable, just because it just lasts 3 times longer than other roofs out there.
If you imagine those panels, right? They will last about 25, 30 years.
35 more.
35, and then you're gonna need to take them out to re-roof if you have regular shingles, and then put them back for another 10 years. Then you gotta rip it off and put. So you really need something that outlasts, let's say, the panels.
And that graph shows it. The only type of roof that can outlast the solar panel is a metal roof. So then another aspect is a product that we push is railless. A lot of solar is put on with rails on top of that, on the top of the metal roof. There's ways to do it without it. And if you do it without it, you save 85% of your mounting system material can be saved by doing a railless product. So and a lot of that is aluminum. So you're taking away 85% of the aluminum you're putting up on the roof to install solar. And then the last thing I'll say is part of the IRA is to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. of solar products, especially solar modules. And I say the benefit of that, and that's really happening. I mean, I'm reading every day about, you know, module manufacturers, huge companies that make silicon chips, setting up plants in the U.S. So it's working. And one benefit on the sustainability side is that you're not shipping stuff from China.
Yeah.
And just the embodied, we're talking about embodied carbon that gets put into it by the time it arrives at your door is now, you know, a lot of that's going to be now made in the U.S. So you just have less
We're talk about supply chain
Yeah,
before,
supply
right?
chain.
We all learned the hard way during the COVID time, right? Ships were not coming, right? We have so many problems with it, so many disruptions. I think a lot of people in the U.S. realize that it's important to have a local supply chain, even if it's 100% of your supply chain, but a good part of your supply chain should be local. So that was driving that already, and then the government with this program is actually doubling down on that. And we see a lot of that, a lot of new construction for chip production here in the U.S. There's all kinds of industries that disappeared from the U.S. years ago, and they're now coming back.
So reshoring.
Reshoring, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess how much of that is, I mean, you said it's a challenge to reduce the amount of embodied carbon. So this is one of the levers you can pull, is actually buying stuff more locally.
Yes, and remember that boat, right, uses fuel, right? And there's a lot of carbon, just that transportation coming from other countries adds a lot of CO2. And I think so having more of a local supply chain does help the environment too.
So I guess from the sustainability, I want to ask you all to answer a question. What advice would you give a small company that's trying to move, thinking about this, listening to what you guys have to say? Some of it's, you know, it's pretty complicated. Like what's a good thing for these companies to do? I guess how can they get on the track, move in that direction? As you said, Leanne, it could actually help companies sell more products when mandates start coming out. I don't know who wants to start.
I'll start with that. So,
Okay.
yeah, it is a challenge, but in some ways, like small companies, you could argue, is advantaged. I already talked about data collection. So, just to put a little bit more of a exact definition to that. So, the carbon accounting rules are pretty specific. Well, I shouldn't say that. They are there, and they are mostly drawn from ISO standards, but there's still there's a lot of information gap between how those rules would apply to the systems and products we do in the United States of America. But it all comes down to transparency and data collection. And so a smaller company actually has a little bit better line of sight, generally speaking, with data collection, because when we went through this, I was part of I was on the manufacturer side when we did our first EPD at MCA, and I was working for a large company. We had 36 plants across the United States, and we were trying, this is just an example, I had numerous cases just like this, but we were trying to figure out, well, how many cylinders of natural gas did we burn by internal forklifts when we were picking up and moving materials from one spot to another, or from one plant to another to be manufacturing. So I walked into the the purchases office, I asked him that question, and he looks at me like I've got 6 heads. And you know, I couldn't tell you that. We buy all this stuff, we sign a contract, gets delivered, we pay the bill, we're done. I mean, I know what we used, I know what we consumed, but I can't tell you how much went to that plant. I can't tell you how much of it was actually returned the next year. I mean, so small company doesn't have those kinds of challenges. So I would encourage them to just start focusing on your data collection, because what is I think at times missed a little bit about this is that you can't show an improvement until you know where you are. And you can't know where you are until you do collect the data and do the baseline. And you can't collect the data and do the baseline unless you have a standard that tells you how to do it. And by focusing on carbon improvement without all of that other stuff cart in front of the horse. Best way to put that. So I would just stay true to this process, and it's because the agility that a smaller company would have, they actually have that capability. So in a lot of ways, they could outperform a larger company in that respect.
Yeah, well, I would say that know what you're buying and bug the heck out of us. Ask questions. Ask us to educate you. Ask the industry to educate you. You know, we are here for you, and demand transparency, right? I think the biggest thing with EPDs, the Environmental Product Declaration, is transparency, right? There's some companies that kind of measure some things a little differently. There's that report is 40 pages long, right? There's one page that is the most important page, but there's a lot of little details in there, and for a small company to try to learn and understand all that is a lot. So really leverage your suppliers, ask questions, make us work for you, right? And just demand transparency, because it is important, and it's gonna become something that will be a law at one point. So get ahead of it, try to understand it, and what you don't know, demand your suppliers, demand your industry representatives to teach you and to show you what you need to know.
And I think being involved in associations like the Metal Construction Association for a small company, there's huge benefits for our membership there. We chose to participate in the industry-wide EPD. It was more affordable to us by doing that. We had the expertise of someone like Bob that has gone through the process before. If we weren't a member, if we didn't do that industry-wide one, we'd kind of be on our own. With our staff as it is now, we'd probably be hiring a third-party consultant to help us through the process. The cost of the EPDs alone is quite large. Add on the consultant's fee or whatever, and it's a really hefty price tag. So that's for a smaller company to be involved in an association that has these types of resources is tremendous help to us.
And we'll always work to that event. I mean, the fact of the matter is, with this industry, it's a lot of small companies, a lot of them. So we have to recognize that and accommodate for it. But like I said, in a lot of ways, it is easier for smaller companies. It's having everything under one roof is a big, important, makes data collection a lot easier.
I really get it. I think belonging in organizations really can be helpful. I mean, I see that in the ones we belong to, and how there's a lot of synergy between companies, and it's just a more efficient way to get things done and to learn.
You're all in the same boat.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we all have our things that we like the way we do things. We think our product is, and it's great that we feel that way. But having walked through these plants, I'm telling you, we all make 80% of that process is the same. We're all doing things the same way. We're buying from the same, and that's okay. So we're all in that same boat, and we can actually work together to make it's the rising tide raises all boats kind of situation.
And these organizations make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. All right. So I want to shift gears a little bit now to the other letters of ESG. So on the social side, as Leanne said, it's all really about people. And this is maybe a little bit of a personal question, but from your life and experience in this industry, when you think of terms that what term am I looking for? Inclusiveness, diversity, like where, I think you're a really good person to ask, because you were one of the first people that I met in the industry when I got into this, through these organizations, and you speak a lot, you're very well known. What has it been like for you, and where do you think the metal industry is at, I guess, from that perspective? Diversity, inclusiveness?
Well, when I started in the industry 30 plus years ago, it was, I was quite often the only female in the room, and wasn't comfortable at times, but it's great to see the change and the shift. There's a lot more women in the industry now. There should be a lot more, but we're getting there. But diversity, regardless if it's by race or age or sex or ethnicity, it really is becoming more and more. The awareness is becoming more that people are really thinking about seeing different people in a room. And, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg, which came first, because with women, I'll use women as an example, but it would probably apply to all the other things that I just mentioned. You kind of have to see it to be it. So for young women that are thinking about maybe getting into this industry, if they see someone like me or other women that have been in it for a while and have made strides, it makes them a little bit more apt to possibly continue with the thought of pursuing a career in that industry. You know, labor is a big issue right now as far as getting enough people to do the work. And I think that has helped with the diversity and inclusion issues as well, because realizing that we need to reach younger people and, you know, maybe women in this industry that hadn't been here before, older people that are still willing and able to do the work. It's really opened people's eyes to look at all these different groups and see how can we include them and bring them into the industry. One thing I've been involved in for the past 7 years, it's called Let's Build Construction Camp for Girls. And we target middle and high school age girls. They come in for a whole week of a free camp, and they get hands-on instruction in everything from electricity, plumbing, HVAC, metal roofing, tiling, painting, the whole shebang. They also go and visit an architect's office. They go to visit a job site. They come to a manufacturing facility like ATAS and see all these possibilities that are available to them. And the last day of the camp, their parents, grandparents, siblings, whatever, come in and we celebrate the end of camp. But then we also educate the parents about the career possibilities for their girls, what starting wages are. We talk about apprenticeship programs. We talk about student debt and where they can be in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years down the road, and a lot of them go on to be business owners of, you know, their own companies. So this has been just a great thing that we've done, and it's helped create awareness with especially the parents, because the schools do a really good job about you got to go to college, you got to go to college, and I'm starting to see a little bit of a shift, at least in our region here. It seems like the trade schools are now more socially acceptable as education without having that huge student debt. And you know, many times with the apprenticeship programs, you get paid to learn, and then you're making a great amount of money upon graduation from that apprenticeship program with little to no student debt.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Congratulations,
In the West
that's
still,
fantastic.
in the West still we did create maybe 7, 8 years ago, we started with one group for diversity and inclusion. And the company decided to just give that group the reins of do the way you want to do whatever you want to. They set a budget for them to do it, and they were really focusing in, let's talk about it, how we're going to be more inclusive, how we're going to do this, embrace diversity. And that group started growing, and the company started offering to others, just pivot to the people, let they decide what they want to talk about, discuss it. Now we have 8 of those groups. There was one focus in sustainability, there's another one focus in education for high school, and the company helps with a little support financially, but it is really driven by the people in the company. They decided they have a pride group now to get more of the gender diversity. So it just blew up, right? And started, so just pivoting to the people, let they start driving that and give them the resources, right? That they can do it. And we're seeing a tremendous change in the culture in the company in short 7 years now. That's cool.
So we're on the road, but we got a long ways to go, right? So I guess, Bob, you know, you have your ear to the pretty close to the industry overall in a lot of aspects. I guess, what do you see that happening on the diversity inclusion side of it?
Well, I have a personal view and an industry view. I'll give you my personal view first. I've thought a lot about this actually, because my background, I'm from an engineer, and somebody likely would come to me and say, well, you're in a male-dominated field, what do you know about diversity? To which I would tell them, you know, you're right, but I do know that I want, as a business person, the best possible people working for me. And I need that. I need to surround myself with people who are better at things than I am, so that we can learn from each other. And if they're female, if they're from Cuba or India or the United States, why would I care? Why would I not have the best possible people working for me, regardless of what those are? Now, culturally, from a company cultural standpoint, is where the challenge is that they don't always feel quite so welcome and accepted at times. But so that's where the work really needs to happen. But I look at this situation, I'm like, it benefits everybody to that respect. So that's my personal view. From an industry standpoint, I think what we need to remember, I think a big part of this, and I talked about it a couple of times, hit on it, transparency is very important. And I find it really kind of ironic. We talk about social and environmental justice, DEI, and all. What's all of this require? Transparency, right? Where does this come from? Well, I won't say where did it come from. What was one of the biggest movers in the governance side of it? You remember the Dodd-Frank Act? I'm from Houston, Texas. You ever heard of Enron? So when all that went down, and there were other things that were attached to it, the mineral conflict, I was in charge of kind of figuring out the conflict mineral situation in my company at that day. You remember what that was? This was child labor being used in Africa to harvest minerals that were used in commercial products in the United States of America. And a lot of people were making a lot of money off of child labor. That, I don't think anybody thinks that's right. So the governance side of it was really born out of a lot of that. And it all revolves around transparency. I doubt any one of us would have knowingly gone and bought a product that was significantly built by child labor in a third world country. I doubt seriously we would knowingly do that. We didn't know any better, and the situation got worse. So I think transparency is really the important part of this. I talked about it in the data collection, the governance, the inclusion. It's all about just looking at your data and analyzing it, asking others to analyze it, sharing it with your stakeholders and your investors, because those folks will provide you with the checks and balances that you need to stay on that path. And to me, I think that's really the core issue. You got to be transparent. It's kind of like, our moms and our dads taught us, if you're afraid to tell somebody that you're doing something, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. So it really is all kind of born from those basic concepts. And it's a formalized version of that. And I personally believe that's really where it all roots from, the transparency.
And I would agree with that too. One thing we didn't really talk about is, recruiting new employees. Well, younger folks are more in tune with what we've talked about than when we were growing up. And if they're considering employment with a company, they're going to be on that company's website, and they want to know what do they do, what's the company culture like, but also what are they doing environmentally and sustainability issues and all of that. So you really, even as a small company, whatever sustainable issues, initiatives that you're doing and the good that you're doing, you need to get that on your website. You need to promote what you're doing, even if you think it's kind of just little measures here or there, whatever. At least it shows that you're aware and that you're building up, you're making improvements, and that goes a long way with recruiting. There's a small amount of people out there looking for jobs, so you've got to do everything you can to make your company look good in their eyes.
And then nowadays they are interviewing us a lot more than we are interviewing them. Right? It is. Right. We are being checked, right? They want to know who they're working for, how you think, how you do, how you treat people, and that is very important. They are interviewing us every time they come to talk to us.
Right. So I agree. I think hiring ties everything together, right? Because you have to prove, as you do with sustainability. Carbon footprint, documenting it, you have to document how you treat people as well. So, and then I guess just to finalize, talking about the governance side, actually I think Marcus, when we were talking yesterday, you had a great way of kind of describing, you have E and you have S, and then guidance. How does guidance fit into the picture? And
the governance piece, US still started with Judge Gary which now is the name of the city, Gary, Indiana, right? He was the president of US Steel, and he created these principles, they call the Gary principles today. And today, that was in the 1900s, right? And today is considered pretty much the first corporate ethics, really corporate document, a governance document that was created. And still guide our company to this day, more than 100 years after it. But we always did governance, right? That we always have those rules that we need to abide from. It's just now into this rules that we are creating is expanding. It's just become bigger. Now we need to worry about the environment also. We need to worry about the child labor. We need to about other kinds of abuse in labor that we see. Like we may think that this doesn't happen close to us, right? 3 years ago, there was a major manufacturer in U.S. Here. They found child labor in it. It was like a different company that worked for them, didn't do work from them, but it was here in U.S., right? And so we need to have those rules in place. We need transparency, and we need to be relentless, checking, and really believing what we say, right? Just putting in the paper doesn't do anything. You need to live by those principles. You need to really get people to buy into those principles, and it's just keep getting bigger and bigger. Every time we're gonna need to worry about more, and it is good for everybody. So let's continue that way.
All right, cool. So, Leanne, any last thoughts on anything we've talked about?
No?
Just checking. Bob?
Really, I would just encourage everybody to, like I said, your internal accounting system will help you with this. This is not drastically different than what you do with money. You're just tracking other things. And I really believe that we're working in the right direction. We got a long way to go in terms of standardization. I know that. A long way to go. And that's what we do in a trade association. We'll continue to work with that, work with others, and be active in that respect. But we'll keep you informed. We'll help you line your priorities up, and we'll have good long conversations about it, and we'll figure this thing out as we need to.
Marcus, any last thoughts? Or?
No, just appreciate, and again, just don't. This is, I would say, 2 years ago, I didn't know anything about Scope 1, Scope 2, and environmental things. This is coming fast and furious for everybody. Don't be afraid of asking. Don't be afraid of using the resources you have in the industry, and demand your suppliers to help you. Right? We all together on this, so we need to help each other and make sure we have a planet for everybody years from now.
Cool. Any questions from the audience? All right, I'm done.
Thank you. Nice job.
Thank you.
Oh, good
Thank
job.
you.
Thanks.
Calls for the
Thank you,
moderator.
guys.
Huh?
Thank you guys. It was awesome.